to the. Alrighty, here we go. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is a really nice turnout. So this is our Archives Month Philly Capstone panel. We expect this to go on for, I want to say, no more than like an hour, maybe an hour 15. If we're really getting into it, then, you know, maybe a little bit longer, but if you can't stay the whole time, perfectly understandable. Thank you for being here anyway. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly, and if any of the other DULASA panelists would like to speak just a little bit about themselves, I'm going to do a quick blurb about 2 upcoming events we have next month, and then we will get started with the panelists. So I'm Ashley Moore. I'm this year's president of DULASA. I was treasurer last year. I'm roughly halfway through my MLIS degree, and I also have, I'm pursuing a minor in UX and HCI, and I'm really excited to be moderating this event. Christine, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'm the DULASA vice president for this year. I was the president last year, and I have technically graduated. So we are definitely excited, and if anyone is interested in becoming an officer of DULASA, we would be more than happy to have anyone join us on the executive board. So you can again contact me or Ashley about that, or reach out to us through dulasamail@gmail.com.
All right. Let's see, moving right along here. I'm going to put, we're going to put our contact information as well as the questions that we are going to be asking in the chat this evening in case anybody comes late or needs to sort of look back and review a little bit. Real quick, I just want to mention that our next 2 upcoming events are in November. We are planning some for December as well, but they're still kind of in the early stages of getting the details together. But our next one is November 4th, same time, also virtual. It's our 2nd event in our coffee chat series, and we're going to be chatting with Lane, who is the outreach librarian with the Free Library of Philadelphia, specifically in, oh God, I'm blanking on the name. It's the, Christine, help me out.
The Culinary Literacy
Yes.
Center at the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Yes, Culinary Literacy Center. I used to work there, and so I know all of those spaces as just brief abbreviations and acronyms. So thank you for that. And then our next event after that is going to be the week before Thanksgiving. On November 18th, we are doing another panel, and it's one of our most favorite events of the year. This is going to be our 4th annual Spotlight on STEM librarianship. We've got a couple of people ready to speak for that. Some people that are currently working for Jefferson. There's somebody else that's working at an academic library, I believe, and some former interns from UPenn, which I know some of you, in fact, probably a lot of you are. So maybe you will know some of these people that are coming to talk about their experience in STEM librarianship. So it's going to be really exciting. Yeah, and Christine put some of the information in the chat. We also have social media pages where we talk about all of this stuff, and I'm going to put that in the chat momentarily. Okay, so we briefly introduce our panelists for this evening, and then once I'm done, if everybody just kind of wants to go around and sort of give maybe a little bit of a longer introduction about themselves and also what they did for their capstone project. So real quick, our first panelist is Hahn, and she did her capstone project with the Drexel Audio Archives in 2019. Our second panelist is our very own Christine Nieman, who also did her capstone project with the Drexel University Archives in summer and fall of 2020. Yen Ho, who did her capstone project with UPenn at the Biomedical Library in the summer and fall of 2020. And Kate Jorgensen, who is currently working on her capstone project with her employer, Avangrid Incorporated, and she has an anticipated graduation at the end of this term. Congratulations. Alrighty, does anybody want to volunteer to go first to further introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their capstone? If not, I will call on somebody randomly. Yen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So yes, everybody, my name is Yen Ho. I was a recent graduate at Drexel University. I just finished back in December 2020. And yes, I did do a capstone project with the University of Pennsylvania's Biomedical Library, where I did a project in collaboration with the best-selling author and professor, Stephen Fried, on working on the Benjamin Rush portal. That's actually one of my favorite projects I've ever done in my life. So I think it's a huge opportunity to work with somebody who has so much expertise on somebody who knows a topic like Benjamin Rush. So I can't wait to discuss more.
Awesome, thanks. I remember attending your presentation. It was really awesome, so.
Thank you.
Kay, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm Kay Hahn. I graduated from Drexel University with my MSLIS and a concentration in archival studies in December 2019, right before the world shut down. I did my archive capstone at the Drexel Audio Archives because at the time I was interested in being an audiovisual archivist, and it was the best option for me. I got a lot of great experience there. It was wonderful, and it really contributed to my resume and got me hired in my present position.
Thanks. Kate, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Kate Jorgensen. Unlike most of you, I'm sitting in Rochester, New York, and I am doing my project. I'm in my last quarter and actually in my last 5 weeks of doing my project with Avangrid, which is the company I actually work for. And I'm building an archive. The company has a records and information management program, but they have no archive program. And so my project, and I am not a staff archivist and won't be the staff archivist after this program, but my project is actually building the structure of an archive to actually put in place carton accessioning, to put in place metadata management, to start item collection. We are closing a site in Rochester and unearthed about 40 boxes of items that needed to be managed or they could have gotten tossed out. So that's my project, and it's been really interesting. I have concerns about its longevity, so I think that's something that we can definitely talk about as part of the course.
Well, thanks.
And I guess I'm last.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Ashley mentioned, I completed my capstone project over the the summer and fall quarters of last year, 2020. I graduated in December 2020. And I worked with the Drexel University Archives, specifically in their digital archives, and more specifically even than that, I worked with the web archive collection. And so I did, my project was a lot of work looking at it, a lot of work with Archivit, which is part of the Internet Archives, and specifically my project, I started out in the first quarter by doing more of like a deep dive and getting really familiar with the collection. And then as I went on in my second quarter, I really took a lot of what I learned from the first quarter and continued that work and also applied metadata to the collection. And I spent a lot of time adding metadata, cleaning up metadata, and just trying to kind of clean it, organize the collection a little bit better and make it a little bit more easier to navigate. And yeah, I'll be happy to talk more about that as well.
Awesome. You and I might have to talk later because I need help cleaning metadata for an assignment for class. So I may be hitting you up about that. But for now, we will focus on the capstone discussion at hand. All right, so we've got a list of questions here that I'm just going to open up to all panelists. If you want to jump in, go ahead. If nobody's sure who wants to go first, I will also just start calling on people if that's okay. And then once we get through those questions, if anyone has further questions, feel free to paste them in the chat at any time and we can get to them right away, but then we will also leave some time at the end to go on and generate further questions or anything that we, anything else that you guys want to talk about that we haven't gotten to. So, all right. So first question, how did each of you guys land on the project idea for your capstone?
I'll go first. All right. So it actually started as an idea when I first arrived at the biomedical library at Penn. So I actually remembered exactly what happened that day. When I first walked into the building, the only thing I noticed in the library was a poster that someone created about this particular painting. I think it's called the Agnew Clinic, if anyone's familiar with that painting. So I was like very fascinated by it and just thinking like, if they're ever going to ask me like, what are some ideas that you like to come up with? And I was thinking like, maybe I want to do something like that, like maybe create some display of anything related to the history of medicine, since my background is mostly in medicine more than, or no, history more than the medical field. So when I was interviewed, I was actually given that chance to really discuss what would you like to do for the biomedical library. And that's when I was told them, you know, I would like to do anything that relates to the history of medicine. And with that, my capstone supervisor, who she eventually became when my capstone project started, she was the one who mentioned about Benjamin Rush and wanted to do a project about him. And later on, where she hoped that I can, at that time, she hoped I can meet Stephen Freed, especially during the pandemic. So that was basically how it all started. I basically started the foundation work of the Rush portal before meeting Stephen. So ever since working with him, you know, everything really changed since.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else like to go next?
Sure, I'll go. So as I mentioned, I work for a company called Avangrid. I came to the company hired as the records and information management manager. I had a small staff. I actually integrated the records program for the company. I have changed positions, and I am now doing project work. But I started this program when I was still the REM manager. So this fall or this spring, someone contacted me and said, you know, as we're moving out of this building, we have all this stuff in the basement, and what are we going to do with it? And there have been pockets of people in the company who have just personally taken on the historic items. We have 8 utilities across the Northeast. Avangrid is a utility and energy company. There's nothing in Pennsylvania for you all to connect with, but we have 2 in New York, 3 in Connecticut, 1 in Massachusetts, 1 in Maine, or 2 in Maine, excuse me. And then we have a renewables division that has home offices in Portland, Oregon, and Boston. And there have been pockets of people. The one in Rochester had recently retired. Nobody was owning this stuff. And I said, oh, wait, I have a capstone coming up. Maybe there's a way for me to get approval to do something with these, right? It took me 3 months to get company approval. So it is really possible to come up with an idea. And I think my part of that story, and it's probably a little longer than we want, but just to fade it in now, is know if you have an idea, it may take you a little while to get it approved. So it did. I think I started the conversations in March. I started my capstone in June. And I actually, because of the closure of the building, I actually started work on my capstone before my capstone officially started. So we had to get the items boxed. So the idea really came that I came across that we need something to manage it. I'm a program builder anyway. And so it really was that piece is natural that really came before coming to the MLIS program. What this project is allowing me to do is take what I've learned in the MLIS, and I started a while ago, so I am an MLIS student, and integrate it with the background that I already have, right? So there's always possibilities there too. And also I think with a corporation, there's possibilities in a corporation to really get your foot in the door, and a huge place for information managers to be in corporations. So just something to think about. But it really was getting approval. I have no funds. I have no extra resources. So I'm building a database using Access. I am using the systems that we already in place. I have bounds within the corporate policies anyway, and there is some structure already there I have to use. I can't go out and shop for archival folders. I just have to do the best that I can do. I did fork my own money and buy archival pencils so that I can have archival pencils, but they're not getting them, they're mine. So, so I think also the story is you have to be creative too.
I can go. So my approach to my capstone was a lot more pragmatic. I had a full-time job while I was in school, and so I needed something that I could work outside those hours. I tried a few different places. They were not flexible enough for me, but I had already been volunteering at the Drexel Audio Archives. And so I spoke to the person in charge of that project, and he said, yes, I can come in on weekends and do that as well. So I just did 2 5-hour shifts on Saturdays and Sundays. And I really wanted more experience digitizing in digitization. And so since they have all these amazing magnetic tapes that they put through the original equipment, and it was captured on Pro Tools, and then those digital files had to be compressed and that. And so all that was a really, really great experience for me. I wasn't able to get that anywhere else, so it was wonderful.
All right, and Christine?
Yeah, I can just kind of, I guess I think I had a somewhat similar experience maybe with Kate, although I didn't have to wait for approval, but I did start reaching out about my capstone very early. I contacted someone in the Drexel Archives, I think around kind of like March, April of 2020, right after the world had shut down. But it kind of worked out that I wanted to do a project on, I really wanted to work in digital archives. And I really kind of came to my, I didn't come as much up with the idea of my project, but I reached out to Sarah, who was the digital archivist at the time at Drexel. And I had met her before, I had met her I think close to the end of 2019. And I knew almost right after I'd met her that I really wanted to do a project working with the digital archives. I had connected with her, and she mentioned that they were happy to have students in the Drexel Archives, capstone students. So I think from around that time of March, April, from then until the beginning of the summer term, I talked to Sarah, and she kind of already had a project in mind working on the web archive, and it was great because it was all remote work, which at the time was all that was really possible. So that's kind of how I fell into my project a little bit, but it honestly was a really good fit in terms of it was the digital archives, but it also was looking at the data and doing some data analysis on the collection, which was also an area of interest for me and that I wanted to get more practical experience with. So that's kind of how I landed on my project. And yeah, it did take a while from when I reached out to starting and then continuing, and it can take a while to get into it, but
that's a really good piece of advice. I'm glad you guys talked about that, because that's kind of, even though capstone for me personally is a little bit further off, that's kind of something that I've always wondered about, how long does that sort of initial process take? And so good to be prepared. All righty. Let's see, I think I'm just gonna go in order here. Did anyone run into any unexpected issues or challenges while completing your project at any stage?
I can talk about that. I had a few. I just did a 1 term, so I had 10 weeks. And so relying on other people to do their part so that I could get my project done was very difficult. Archive work is often really iterative, and it doesn't follow a very straight path. So that was a really great thing to learn. So I had to wait for somebody who could train me on the digitization and running the original equipment and on compressing all the files and working with Pro Tools. And I had to, there was one point where we ran out of some supplies. I could not order those myself. I had to wait for somebody else to get those for me. So I had to just pivot really quickly and do something else, which again was really good training. But those were a few things that caused things not to go very smoothly.
So I'll speak to it a little bit. Like Kay, I am, and I don't think I was clear about this when I was talking, I am doing my project outside of business hours. I am a project manager. I am currently running a project that is installing 3,100 devices into vehicles, totally different from archive work. So I simply don't have the bandwidth during my workday to work on it. So I get comments from people say, hey, I saw you online at 8 o'clock at night. Well, I'm online at 8 o'clock at night because I have to do the work on the company computer. And because we are connected, and I work from this room. So I am basically a remote worker. I don't go anywhere. I literally like shut down my email and walk away for about an hour and come back, right? And that's one of my challenges is I almost can't separate from work because they still notice I'm there. I shut all my communication devices down, but they still see me, right? So that's, and being a project where I have people who are servicing 3 hours behind me. I went into Teams last night to move a procedure into the place where we're storing them. And somebody from that area popped up online to catch me, right? So I think that's one challenge, right? The other one is because I am doing something that's outside my business, there's no one designated to maintain it afterwards. I'm very, very concerned about longevity, and I'm not getting the traction that I need on outreach, right? So, and because of my bandwidth and I have to do outreach during the day, right? I have to kind of manage it. Outreach is a real issue. So I've started something, I don't know if you all have heard of something called Yammer. Yammer is the corporate version of, think of it as like Instagram and Twitter mixed in together, right? So I've started that channel as a way to try to get people who are all doing this little historic stuff all over the place to start talking, but people have to be on the medium, right? So I think that's one of my largest challenges is what happens to this stuff after I am not there and I'm doing my full time. Do I end up having to do this, basically having just volunteered myself to do this for the rest of my life with the company? It's a real question. And I think it's a question that I see a lot of people have during capstones is what happens to all the work that I've done after the capstone, right? We don't always have that answer. In my case, I'm going to see what's going to happen, right? So I think that's a real challenge. And it's one I'm still working on as I'm towards the end of the project is how do I do outreach and how might I be able to get some support to make sure that there is a storage space for this, that maybe I can get an intern this coming summer, or someone has to be, we're kind of to the point where someone has to be on site. There is some digital material. There might be an opportunity for someone to do a capstone only on the digital items, right? Where do I go from here? So I think that's my biggest challenge is there might be an opportunity, but then again, we're in Rochester. So it's a real challenge. So I think that's what I've seen. And I don't know, I'm seeing some nods. So I know that people are kind of wondering in some cases what's happened with their work afterwards too. And I see that on the boards too, people talk about it. And something else, realize I'm going to guess that most people online outside of Kay and I are under the requirement of a 2-quarter capstone. I only had a 1-quarter requirement. I chose to do 2 quarters. So if you have that requirement, you can do 2 quarters. Actually, you can take the course up to 3 quarters if you look at the requirements. So consider your project and take a look at it and say, hey, maybe I have an opportunity. Do I want to do 3 capstones? Is it a better fit than an elective or opportunity that's open to me, right?
I can totally echo that, Kate, because I also only was required to do 1 quarter of a capstone, but I wanted to do 2, and that's why I approached someone early, because it's like I know I'm still a bit from graduating, but I knew I wanted to do it for at least 2 quarters, and I I'm so glad that I did it for 2 quarters, because if I had stopped after the first quarter, there was so much, like I had so many challenges in my first quarter just because I started out thinking my project was going to be one thing and it ended up being way more tricky and complicated. And like the further I got into the collection, the more like mess I was finding. So I was so happy to be able to like continue working on the project for a second quarter. And it, I can talk more about this later, but I sort of got a happy ending from, not a happy, well, you know, not an ending either, but actually my project, because that was something that I very much incorporated when I finished at my project at the end of last year, was the next steps. And like, I fortunately had a supervisor who was able, she was at least able to carry on some of the work that I had done. But actually I'm now doing that work. I've come back around somehow. Well, you know, just somehow. And it's amazing to actually revisit my work after like the last 9 months and to see what changes were made after my project ended and also what still needed to be done. But I definitely can relate to that challenge of like, how will this be continued? And it's just another reason why I'm so happy that I had 2 quarters to do my project, since it really would have been a mess if I'd only been able to do 1.
All right. So I guess the main challenges when working on the Benjamin Rush portal is definitely the technical part, because the Benjamin Rush portal was created on the LibGuide platform. So it was easier for me to display all the different contents in each tab. It makes it easier to read. I would say one experience I had when it comes to technical issues is trying to embed a PDF file into LibGuide. I never done that in my life. I tried looking up online how to actually do it without making errors or mistakes. When I did it for the first time, I assume I did it right. It turns out that trying to embed a PDF file online, the link that I used was actually a third-party link, and it didn't really work very well when Stephen was trying to test it for me. So I was like, oh man. So that was that was when I had to contact the tech people about it. And it turns out it was actually the most simplest thing. They just used a LibGuide link to embed a PDF file into the portal. And yeah, that PDF file was actually a calendar I created that this focuses on the topic of yellow fever that Benjamin Rush did play a part of during that time. So like that was like the most irritating, because that was like my favorite thing that I ever done at the for the portal. And it's like, oh my gosh, the PDF file is in my way of trying to get that out there. And also focusing on the technical part, Stephen and I were trying to make sure that this Rush portal is easy to find when people are searching through Google or whatever search engine, you know, the SEOs. We're trying to like figure out like, how can we make this Rush portal stand out compared to all the other links that we see, like Wikipedia or some other big, I don't know what the name is, but you know, the bigger websites. But what we're trying to do is just adding as many terms as we can that people might look up in terms of Benjamin Rush. It's really interesting if you guys want to try it. Like if you look up Benjamin Rush only, you don't really see the Rush portal until like maybe the next few pages. But if you include UPenn with Benjamin Rush, it does include. So it was like, okay, so I guess I have to remind people, if you look up UPenn or my name or Stephen's name, you can, it's literally on the front page of the results. So yeah, I think that was like our problem. But it kind of worked out when I did the experiment myself. So I think it's okay. Another problem that I had was definitely the ownership, like being like taking ownership of the project that you're doing. So throughout the project, you know, when Stephen was emailing me about making some changes or suggestions or just like, hey, like this content isn't right, change this and all that stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, but like I end up fixing some things for him. And then there's times that he asked me like, is it okay if we include this content into the portal? So initially the intention of my project was to focus more on Rush's career in medicine and his role at the Penn community. But when Stephen wants to include anything that's not medical related, I was questioning myself, like, do I really want to include it? Especially until actually 2020, I would call it the active year, when that some events happened. Now, Stephen and I were like discussing, like, should we include some topics that people can actually look into, since some people have some debates on some things, so we thought it's more appropriate. But going back to the ownership, when I talked to my capstone supervisor about this, she's just telling me, always remind me, like, this is your project. You are, you are like, I don't know what the word is, but you are just, you're in charge. Yeah, you are in charge. Don't let Stephen take over this project that you are doing. So that was really something that really stuck into me. And of course, as Katie and Christine mentioned, definitely what happens to the capstone project. So definitely the same situation there too.
It's really interesting. Thank you guys all for that. Good stuff to think about. So this kind of goes hand in hand, I think, a little bit with the question about challenges and issues. But is there anything specific that you wish you knew before starting your capstone or before deciding on the specific project that you chose? Also, yeah, feel free to think on this, on answers to the questions a little bit if you need a little bit of time. I think you guys got these questions beforehand, but feel free to take some time.
I'll speak up. I don't think there's so much that I wish I knew, but more what I actually was able to access, which took care of the question I wish I knew. So the quarter before I did my capstone, someone in one of my classes had just finished his capstone, shared with me a totally different capstone, totally unrelated, but shared with me what his objectives look like, what his metrics look like, what his success metrics and milestones look like. And it gave me an image in my head of, okay, this is what my proposal could look like. Mine looked very different than his in the end, but seeing what somebody else had done had been very, very helpful. And I do think that, I know this summer they were collecting proposals. Denise Augusto was collecting proposals or short summaries of what people have done, but I don't think there's a resource bank for examples of proposals. And I think it would really help people frame and understand their project and understand the scope, because especially if you're going to do it 2 quarters, I think that gives people a better image, because really, and those of us that were here at the transition, because there 3 out of 4 of us at least 3 out of 4 of us are the grandfathered group. We were there when the program transferred from the MLIS to MIS. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that they made the 2-quarter capstone was so that people would have 2 quarters to do a project. They really didn't intend people to do 2 one-quarter projects. I see a lot of people doing that, and they're having the same issues that Kay mentioned. 1 quarter, I'm really crunched. So I really advocate, if I didn't know that option was already there for me, I would have said, I might have done 1 quarter. And so I really advocate looking and trying to get things to share, talking to colleagues. I am 100% online student. I was still able to get it, so that can happen. I think that took care of the things that I would have wished I'd known when I started my capstone in this past term, is being able to see and understand what other people have done.
I don't think there's anything that I wish I knew before, because what I wanted was to pad up my resume so that I could get a job. That was it. But I think for a lot of people, this is sort of, like Yenho mentioned, this is like a pet project that you really, really want to do. I think this is the time that you can do that sort of a project. Mostly you have to do what somebody else is willing to pay you to do, which is great, but this is the time you can really dig in and really geek out and do what you really, really want to do. So I think that's something really important to think about before you launch this.
Yeah, this will sound like a weird answer, but this is what I thought of when I saw this question. I thought of patience. It's not so much that I wish I had like known that, but I think that I wish I had had more patience with myself when starting the project. I think because I think like for me, my project was totally unrelated to the work I was doing at the time, and I mean, for part of the time, I was actually like, there was a small amount of time during when I was doing my project in which I didn't have work, which was it's like, this is what I'm doing. And I think that like looking back at the time that I spent doing my capstone, I think I often felt like a pressure that I needed to be hitting my objectives, that I needed to be just doing more. And I think that I wish I'd had more patience with myself and allowed myself to be like, you know, when you're actually out in the real world and working at when you're like, I feel like I've heard them say, I feel like I've heard that, you know, it can take like 3 to 6 months even to get settled into a job. So when you're starting a project that's like totally different from anything you've done before, like it's going to take time to get settled into that and time to really see results from what you're doing. And I think that by the end of honestly, it took until I think the end of my 6 months, my 2 10-week quarters, that I could really like look back and feel like I was comfortable and confident in working with the digital archives in the collection that I was working on. So I think that's something that I just wish I had had more patience with myself. It's a weird answer maybe, but that's what I thought of that question.
I think that's a really great answer because like, yeah, I think I really, really liked your analysis of it. It's kind of like getting used to a new job or do something like that. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I actually never knew anything before the capstone. I was just all about just going with the flow and just do it. I never really thought of any like, you know, anything that gets in my way. I just did it. I just went out there.
Nice.
I think if I can add to that, I think it partially depends on where you're doing the capstone. In some places, you may really have the freedom to have that flexibility to go with the flow. In my situation, I did not. I actually had to do 3 proposals before I ever did my capstone proposal. So by the time I wrote the capstone one, I pretty much knew the story of my project. So I think that flexibility now depends on where you're doing it. But now on the other side of it, I am hardly managed at all during my project. So now that I'm on the other side of all that approval stream, I have a ton of flexibility within my project. And as long as I'm not costing them money, I'm good, right? So that part is like a really positive piece, but I do think it depends where you are and know that you might be able to go in somewhere and totally go with the flow and it might get approved super fast, or you might be able to grab an idea off the resource bank that is just perfect for you and will already be, you know, basically an approved project. Or you may be in my situation where you're actually meeting with your senior management to explain why this is important and having to go to the president of the New York division to get them to sponsor it and the whole piece. So knowing there could be one extreme or the other.
Great. Let's see. So I'm gonna skip 2 down to 1 because this was something that I know both Christine and I were really eager to talk about with other people. What was your experience like shadowing somebody in the field or working closely with somebody in the field for your project, if that was a part of your capstone?
So yeah, I'll definitely start. Working with Stephen was a huge accomplishment in my life, because never in my life I worked with someone who is, really out there, being a best-selling author and a professor. Like, oh my gosh, he's all that. So, and I never knew like I could meet someone with so much expertise on a subject like Benjamin Rush. And when I first met him, I never knew like he would just like share every single detail about Benjamin Rush that I may not need to know, but yeah, I mean, I think that's just really cool. But and there's times that he is very critical about the content that I initially put on the Rush portal, and I do appreciate his feedback, because when I started this project, I know nothing about Benjamin Rush. I just did all these online researches. I even bought his book. It's actually called Rush, Revolution, Madness, and the Visionary Doctor Who Became a Founding Father. Such a long title, but I actually read the whole book. When the pandemic began, my capstone supervisor was very nice enough to send me the book to my house. And that's when I began like, oh my gosh, Stephen wrote that much. So yeah, I mean, I think just working with him is just my greatest experience ever.
If anybody else wants to jump in on this, I'm not 100% sure that everybody necessarily shadowed somebody within their project. So if you guys want to keep going, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I didn't. So I worked weekends, so it was pretty much me and just whoever I could get in to train me. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm similar. I am really an island, pretty much on my own. But I will address kind of unusual. I also have a staff member. He is an intern. So I have the inverse going on, where I have an intern who is working with me. And so I'm on that inverse piece. And one of the things I think, that he said to me this summer, he's unusual. Our intern summer program actually is amazing. If there's a position that comes up, I think people really should look at it. And if I can get one into the intern program, it's an amazing program with amazing leadership. But he told me, he said, you are there and you talk to me. And what I've discovered is a lot of the interns do not have managers. The managers dump work on them, tell them to go do it, and walk away. And instead, I tried to give him the opportunity. Hey, you want to reach out and have a meeting to talk about certain work with other people? Sure, you've got that time, right? And now he's extremely part-time, still working with us. We've kept him on. Very different with the school situation. But as an intern manager, I had to remember this person has no experience, and it's okay to have them ask the questions, and it's okay to get the guidance. So on the other side of it, when I look at, if I were to flip the side and be on his vision, he wanted to always have a space where he was able to ask questions. And so that's what I would think people really should push for. Be sure you can ask questions of the people that are guiding you, or that they allow you to, or give you the opportunity, or engage you, or link you to people who can either answer your questions or even give you time to talk about the work that they're doing, because it may broaden and give you perspectives in space. And especially if you're in an environment, as we hopefully soon start opening up more from COVID, to allow people to actually be in space, to really have those questions, right? Because it is a way to, as Kay mentioned, it's a way to leverage in your career, right? If you are going to try to get an experience to leverage into your career, it is a way to do it, and an opportunity to connect with people who have experience.
Yeah, I can just kind of, I was very much shadowing my supervisor, I would say. But I think that like what I actually learned the most from that experience, like from shadowing that person and from shadowing my supervisor, was actually about managing a project and managing another person. So kind of what Kate, you were saying in a way in the reverse, that like, I feel like I actually learned, I mean, I learned a lot about archiving. I learned a lot of like technical skills, but well, I mean, I did and I didn't. Like my supervisor was great at pointing me to the help area, like the help sections for Archive It, but I also had to, I did a lot of my own digging in there. There wasn't a lot of like, oh, let me show you how to do this. But I think that more what I learned from her, like learned from the experience of shadowing someone, was what it's also like to manage a project from like start to finish, and the importance of like communication in both in asking questions from your supervisor, and also like, I think it was really great that my supervisor, we had weekly check-ins where she would ask me, we would talk about the progress of the project. And there was just a time when there was always a designated time where I could ask for help or explain something I was having a difficult time with. So yeah.
That's really great. I see that we are approaching 8 o'clock here, so I'm actually going to sort of combine the next two questions, and then I think if you guys are cool, we'll open it up to everybody else to ask any other sort of follow-up questions that we have, and then we'll go from there. So the last part of the main questions I want to ask you guys is, what advice can you offer both students aiming to do their capstone in an archival setting, as well as really just any MIS or MLIS students who have yet to complete their capstone, no matter what setting they choose to do it in? What advice can you offer? And then sort of kind of hand in hand with that, what would you say is like the most important thing that you learned along the way and throughout your experience?
Sure. I can tackle that. Right now, I am a contract processing archivist with a company called History Factory. And right now they have me on an archive modernization project. So it's a 4-year project at a private school. And I think my capstone lend me to that, because right after I did the capstone, I took a digitization class through the program. And so part of that was writing a digitization plan. So I wrote one for the audio archives to see if I could turn that into a full-time job. And I took that to the project manager. We met with the program director, and that, because of funding, that didn't come around, but I did get to put that on my resume. And one of my interviewers picked up on that, was very intrigued that I had done that. So I think that really helped me capture my new job. That was great. I think the best thing I learned during my capstone was to be nimble. When I would find a block, I know that if I was in charge, I could do everything I needed to do, but because there had these challenges, I had to be nimble and being able to pivot really quickly and not waste any time. When there were no supplies left for one particular project, I pivoted and started doing arranging for different processing. And when I needed somebody to help me with the digitization and they were not available, but I could work on the digital files on my own. So it's just being able to, go with the flow. If something's not working the way to plan, it's fine. You can just learn to do something else. So did I miss anything else? Did I get everything you needed?
I think along with the nimble, know that you have some flexibility in the program, which I didn't really realize until you start looking at what do you do at midterm, what do you do at final. Well, at midterm, you have the opportunity to revise and adjust your objectives, right? And to adjust your metrics. And so know that what you set up in the beginning, yeah, a lot of people say, well, I may get behind. Well, yeah, you might also get ahead, right? So how do you adjust and adapt your program? And that is normal within the environment, even in a corporate environment, to have to understand, adapt, and pivot your work, as Kay said, and change it a little bit. and know that what you might end up with at the end might be a little different than what was originally designed because of the nature of the project. It doesn't mean your project wasn't a success. It just means your project was different.
Yeah, you just don't have the control that you think you're going to. I think that was another great thing that I learned, because I knew I had my metrics. I was going to go there and meet them right on time, and you just can't do that. It just doesn't always work that way. Real life is not like school.
Okay, that's a great, yeah, I think that's a great thing to say with regards to the capstone. And I kind of think, but like, that's kind of where my advice actually comes from, is that I would say that like the advice I would give is like, don't be afraid to approach someone. Don't be afraid to really develop and propose a project that is something that you want to do post school. Because I think that like, you know, don't be afraid to like approach your dream company or, you know, an organization you really admire. Like, I think it's important that the project, that your capstone project, and especially because I'm currently job searching, and I think that being able to talk about my capstone project is one of the best things like that is in my toolbox as I'm looking for a job. And it's also, I think like one of the most important things I learned from the capstone experience was that one, that I do really love working in an archives. So that was, I really gained a lot of like hands-on experience, and that's experience that I can also now talk about and apply, both in my in my current job and in as I'm looking for a full-time job. So yeah, I think that echoes a little bit of what Kay and Kate were talking about. But I think that was like, that's the biggest piece of advice I would probably give. One of the piece of advice, and something that I definitely learned through this experience.
Okay, so what I've learned throughout working on the project was definitely understanding how important primary resources are. You know, that was the time when I like truly understood like how valuable these resources are. And just thinking about, you know, when we were doing research projects on some topics, whether it's a person or a place or something else, you would always go online first and just find these resources and all these secondary sources that you would find. But after learning from Stephen and, you know, for myself too, you know, looking through primary resources like archives are so important, because, you know, people tend to really have different views on like a certain issue. I guess, you know, by using primary resources, it really gives people like a first person point of view. You know, like when looking through the letters of Benjamin Rush, you get to really see like a first person insight of like what his experience was, you know, when he faced like certain situations, like during yellow fever, or some like topics that are very controversial to today. So I think that putting up primary resources into my Rush portal is something that I you know, truly understood like the value to. And also, like, this is actually a coincidence when I started my project, because it was during the pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that these primary resources and archival sources are 100% available to everybody who doesn't have access to a library or an archives, since they were closed during the time. So we really created that opportunity to you know, find or gather all the primary resources that Stephen actually used to write his book on Rush into my Rush portal. So that was really cool. They really made me realize how important these resources are. Again, just to circle back on just people getting that first person point of view of looking through resources like the Rush letters. My advice to those who are in the capstone and thinking about their future, yeah, again, like everybody else says, just be committed about what you want to do in the rest of your life. If you're somebody like me who has a history background and interned at anything that's not history related, like in the medical, just don't be afraid to speak out about something that you can actually try to compromise with. If you're like, for me, when I interned at the biomed library at Penn, I just wanted to bring it out at least to discuss if I want to, add something else to. So don't be afraid to speak out about what you wanted to do. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank all of you guys. And looks like everybody is bombarded with meetings, unfortunately, and had to run. So if you guys don't mind, there was one thing that came up while everybody was talking that I just kind of wanted, if anyone wants to speak more about. One of the things that I'm personally very worried about with Capstone someday is having to work a lot of extra hours on weekends outside of work and that kind of thing. And so I don't know, does anyone have tips for kind of coping with stress that comes from that, or just coping with it in general, or anything?
So I've been working full-time and going to school since day one. And what I did was took only one class a quarter. So if that's your path, do only one class a quarter when you're doing your capstone. The second time is, kind of mentally have a schedule. It may not be your perfect schedule, but say it's okay. Monday night, you're beat. You just can't do it. And an hour on the capstone is all you can do. An hour is all you can do. And Saturday, 3 hours is what you do, right? I think you just have to be reasonable to balance it within your life, right? So, I just realized when I sign off at night at work that I need a break, take a break. And then, also give yourself time to do that work-life stuff. So I think that it would be very hard to do your capstone and take additional classes. So unless you're in a position where that is the only thing you're doing is taking school, I really advocate doing your capstone as the only class you do. And that'll allow you to balance the time.
That's a great piece of advice. That's I've been in the same boat, working full time and also taking one class at a time for many reasons. But you're right. Sometimes that really is all you can do, and it does. While the pace is slow, COVID made time just seem more of a construct than ever. So keeping that in mind now, sometimes I think that's just the way to go. You got to do what you're capable of, and not too much more.
I think I'd echo that too, because working full time and then working on this, it's like having two jobs. So really you're working 7 days a week. So I found it would be impossible to add a class onto that. But the nice thing about the capstone was that there was not, it was not as intense amount of homework that you had to do. You had metrics to meet, but that was during your capstone. It wasn't on top of a class you were taking. So for me, it was a different sort of shift of responsibilities. But yeah, adding exams or essays on top of that, I think would be too much. Another thing would be to remember that this is for the long haul. This is something that you want to do. This is practicing for having a job in your chosen career. And so thinking of it that way, it's a lot of work now, but it's what you want to be doing. It's something that you can put onto your resume. It's a piece of work that you've developed, a personal project that you've developed. So I tend to find that you have a bit more ownership about that rather than writing essays based on somebody else's prompt or some readings that you've done. This is more personal. So it was a lot easier to dedicate time and energy to it.
Alrighty. Does anybody else have any questions, any final thoughts, anything else that they'd like to go over before we break?
I'm curious about Kate's project. So do you think you'll be able to keep that going? Me
personally, probably not. I've been pulling 9 to 10 hour work days because my project starts to go live next week. It's been tough. Do I think I will keep doing it? Maybe through the Rochester stuff. But one of our challenges is the historic items are sitting not only in Rochester, New York, they're sitting in Binghamton, New York, which is down near Pennsylvania line. They're sitting in Orange, Connecticut, which is New Haven area. They're sitting in Hartford, Connecticut. They're sitting in Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, right? So where's the difficulty in that one, right? So I think it's one of the reasons why I thought if I could start some outreach and get some energy. So one of the things I really want to do is engage with our corporate communications. I have a communication plan just to get the word out, to get people more interested. I'm willing to do it, but I don't want to, I'm not in a position where they would support me running that program, because that is sort of falls under the term program manager, and I'm a project manager. So they make a line on that difference. Projects have a start and a beginning, they move on, you turn it to somebody else, they run them, right? A program is continuous, right? So it's a very different approach, honestly, different pay ratings, there's all kinds of stuff, just like libraries have the different pay ratings. It's the same deal in the corporate life. What I would advise people to do, and I just, to switch off your question, because I just don't have a really good answer. I would love to see people doing it, and I think intern is probably my answer. Is I advocate, and I say this almost everything that anyone ever sees me on, get a class in project management. Get it, and then use this project to leverage what you've learned in that class and get that on your resume. Project management is huge, and you don't have to be a project manager to sell those skills. They will pay off in a big way. And this project, really running a capstone project, is running a project. So you suddenly have that experience that you can leverage. So I think it's really a big one. I have vocalized that also within the library program itself, but I think it would really value people. And it's just the climate today, you know, that if you can take, and I didn't know this for a while, but you can take some of your electives outside of the library program. Take a look and see if you haven't had project management. Is there something basic? I think with Drexel, you also have the ability to access LinkedIn Learning. It's an amazing resource, absolutely amazing resource. And if you learn, learning through video is a good way to learn, you can get some really core project stuff on LinkedIn or learning, short to long videos. And the libraries, of course, have access to all kinds of learning tools. So I would say get it and then use the project to leverage it.
I will do a quick blurb because I just so happened to get a chat on the lib chat about LinkedIn Learning earlier today. You have access to that as well through the Free Library of Philadelphia. And they have anybody who has a Drexel ID card or is in the area or anything, you can always access that online for free through Free Library of Philadelphia. So I think that's really excellent. It's the same thing as lynda.com, I think, or it's like a combined thing with them now. And it's really, really valuable. I remember learning about that in undergrad, and it's been a resource that I've used a couple times. So definitely love that.
If I could share one more piece of advice too, related to LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. It's not the same type of don't use it as the same type of social media channel as Facebook. Keep your Facebook stuff on Facebook. But I got my current job with my current employer, well, not the role I'm in now, but when I started with my employer, through a post on LinkedIn, a job posting on LinkedIn. So I think it's a great way to connect with the people that you're connecting with in Drexel. It's a great way to connect with people that you are making connection with later. You never know when that's going to pay off. And it does operate a little differently than a lot of the other social media channels. So do it, and then, invite people, and start to build that resource field.
And yeah, another plug, DULASA actually has a LinkedIn group now. So any DULASA students, any DULASA alumni, or any Drexel alumni, sorry, any Drexel current students or alumni are welcome to join. Grouped on LinkedIn. That is a place where we post about our events that are coming up. And I can second that LinkedIn's a great place to connect with people, and it is kind of the future of networking, or it's the now of networking.
I agree. It's they have a function now where you can check a box saying I'm looking for a job. So I get stuff all the time. I actually get really good stuff now. I have a great job, but eventually my contract will end. So that's going to be a really great resource to reach out and find more work after this.
Definitely. I just put mine in the chat if anyone wants to connect. And if you're interested in joining DULASA's page, you can just search us directly or message Christina or I, and we can add you. We also advertise our events and stuff there, and we post all the registration links. So yeah, good stuff. All right, guys, I think we can wrap up. Thank everybody so much for being here. Sorry that we have sort of had a couple people leave. I know people are super busy though. And one thing Christina and I didn't know until the other week is that apparently a lot of people have class at this time on Thursday nights. And so it's kind of like, oh. But thank you guys so much for being here. Seriously, this has been a really great event. I hope we can do it again soon. Maybe next term or another term, and maybe we can do some more themed type capstones. Good luck to everybody with everything that you guys are pursuing right now, and collective good luck to all of us in continuing to get through COVID and working through COVID and all of that good stuff. So we'll post on social media when this is up on YouTube, and yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording now. So if you have been watching this recording, thank you as well for watching this.